You've always known that something about the way you experience the world is different. Not loudly different, not in the way that announces itself in rooms or demands to be acknowledged. Quietly different, the kind of different that lives mostly inside you, in the particular speed of your thinking, in the connections you make before you can explain where they came from, in the way you understand the subtext of a situation while everyone else is still reading the surface. You've known this for a long time, and for almost as long, you've known that knowing it changes very little about how hard it actually is to live inside a mind like yours, because intelligence at this level is not the clean, confident, frictionless thing that popular culture makes it look like. It is not a superpower you activate when needed and set aside when you want to rest. It is the permanent condition of your inner life. It is there when you want it and there when you don't. It is there at 2 in the morning when you should be sleeping, and instead, you are thinking about something someone said 4 days ago, not because it hurt you, but because you haven't finished understanding it yet. It is there in conversations where you already know where things are going and have to make the quiet decision again about whether to arrive there early or wait for everyone else to catch up. It is there in the gap between how much you see and how much you're able to say, which is often wider than people around you would ever guess. That gap is one of the loneliest things about being you. And it starts earlier than most people realize. You learned young that your mind moved at a speed that made other people uncomfortable. Not because you were showing off, yeah, you rarely were, but because full engagement with your own intelligence could close rooms, end conversations, make people feel something they didn't want to feel in your presence. So you learned to modulate, to meter out what you understood, and when you let it show, to ask questions you already knew the answers to give people the experience of arriving somewhere alongside you rather than finding you already there, waiting. You became extraordinarily good at making your intelligence invisible when visibility would cost you something. And the cost of that skill, paid quietly over years, is a certain kind of exhaustion that has no clean name. The exhaustion of perpetually performing a lesser version of yourself for the comfort of the rooms you're in. Women specifically carry this in a way that is distinct and underexamined. High intelligence in men is celebrated, recruited, rewarded openly. High intelligence in women has historically been met with something more complicated, admiration laced with unease, respect that comes with conditions, spaces that want the output of your mind without the full weight of your presence. You absorb these signals early, process them with the same thoroughness you process everything, and arrived at a set of adaptations that kept you functional in environments that weren't entirely built for you. You became fluent in the art of being palatable, of being brilliant without being threatening, of knowing when to lead and when to disappear. This fluency is real competence. It has served you, and it has also, in ways you're still mapping, cost you something. The inner life of a woman with a very high IQ is not simply faster or sharper than average. It is more layered, more recursive, more populated with simultaneous threads of thought that run parallel and intersect and sometimes contradict each other in ways that take real effort to manage. You don't think in straight lines, you think in structures, in patterns and systems and relationships between ideas that most people around you aren't tracking because they're not built to track them. This makes you exceptionally good at certain things. It also makes ordinary life, ordinary conversations, ordinary problems, ordinary emotional situations feel strangely difficult sometimes, not because they're beneath you, but because your mind brings more to them than they require, and the excess has nowhere to go. This is where the anxiety lives for many women like you. Not in dramatic crisis, but in the chronic low-level experience of a mind that generates more than the moment demands. You overthink not because you choose to, but because your cognitive engine runs at a speed that doesn't have an idle setting. You analyze your own behavior with the same precision you'd apply to anything else, which means you are rarely, if ever, fully at rest inside yourself. There is always a part of you watching, assessing, finding the gap between what happened and what should have happened, between who you are and who you could be, between what you said and what you actually meant. This self scrutiny is not neurosis. It is intelligence turned inward, which is one of the more demanding places for it to live. Relationships carry their own specific complexity. You read people with an accuracy that is sometimes more information than you wanted. You pick up on inconsistencies, on unspoken dynamics, on the distance between what someone presents and what they actually feel, often before they're aware of it themselves. This makes you perceptive and it makes you compassionate, and it also makes you very hard to deceive, which not everyone in your life has found comfortable. You've had people feel exposed around you without quite knowing why. You've had intimacy complicated by the fact that you already understood something before the other person was ready to say it. You've learned to hold what you know more carefully than feels natural, to protect people from the experience of being fully seen before they've chosen to be visible, what you want more than almost anything. And this is the longing that sits underneath so much of your daily life, is to be met. Not impressed, not admired, not slightly intimidated, met. To be in a conversation where you don't have to slow down, where the other person is operating at a comparable depth, where you can say the actual unfiltered version of what you're thinking and have it received without confusion or defensiveness or the particular flatness that happens when a thought lands in a room that wasn't ready for it. These conversations exist. They are rarer than they should be, and their rarity shapes you in ways you might not have fully accounted for. In the selectiveness of your close relationships, in the depth of your investment when you find someone who can actually keep up, in the grief that is particular to outgrowing connections that once felt like enough. There is also a specific relationship with your own potential that women at this level carry and rarely talk about openly. You know what you're capable of. You can see with uncomfortable clarity the distance between what you've done and what you could do if the conditions were right, if the self-doubt were quieter, if you'd been given different permissions at different points in your life. The awareness of your own ceiling and the awareness of how rarely you've been allowed to reach it sits in you not as arrogance, but as a kind of chronic, low grief, a sense of something unrealized that you can't stop being aware of. But here is what is also completely true. That mind of yours, the one that won't stop, the one that sees too much, the one that holds you to standards no one else around you would think to apply, is also the source of everything that makes your inner life genuinely extraordinary. The depth of your understanding, the quality of your attention, the richness of what you notice and feel and make meaning from, the connections you see that no one else in the room is seeing. These are not small things. They are the texture of a life lived at full cognitive intensity, which is demanding and isolating and also, on the right days, completely remarkable. You were never going to be easy to know. You were never going to be simple to be. But you were always going to be this: someone whose mind makes the world more complex and more interesting and more fully understood simply by moving through it. That is not a burden with no name. That is who you are.